that's how you make keto coffee. What are we working on today, Kem? I don't know, some Acura TSX. What are we gonna do? The brakes. So we're gonna get in here, show you how this is done. It's one of those rotating pistons that go into the caliper. And you can get this all taken apart. I'll show you how it goes. All right, first thing you wanna do is try to get these screws out before you do anything else. And I bought this Tekton Impact driver, which I'm gonna use to get these screws out. It's better than using a regular screwdriver because you could strip those screws and then you'd have to use a drill to press them out. Give us a few whacks here. Turn as you do it. There we go. I'm gonna do this one here. And some rust is gonna come off, so just be sure not to inhale that. Okay, so there's a 13mm bolt, actually two of them, holding in the brake caliper bracket. So you're going to use a 17mm to hold the spindle and the 13mm wrench just to get that bolt out of there. So be sure to do the top and bottom. So what I'm using here, these gear wrench ratcheting wrenches, these things are great. Picked them up on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in them. You can get them yourself. They're a 16-piece set, less than $100. All right, so I got the brake caliper off. Got it hanging with some bungee cords back here. You don't want to break that hose. And I'm going to pop out these brake pads here. There goes one. There goes two. And there's a little retaining spring that goes on the back of it. You can choose to replace if you want or not. That's entirely up to you. And to get the rest of this bracket out here, it's going to be the 17mm bolts, two of them. So it's 13 that hold the brake caliper onto the bracket, and then it's going to be two 17s that will hold in the caliper itself. All right, that's having a little problem taking off this rotor right here, so just take a rubber mallet, just kind of bang around it. Comes right out. All right, one of the first things I'm going to do here, now that I have the spindle exposed, like I said in my last video, you can wear a mask or you can hold your breath, go for it. So I'm going to remove all this rust, and then I'm going to put anti-seize on it towards the end of putting everything back together. All right, so after getting off that rust as much as you can, spray it down with some brake cleaner. Get the remnants off. See, there's a lot of gunk and nastiness up in here. Just have something underneath to catch it. That brake fluid will soak into the cardboard, but it also does evaporate, so you don't really have to worry about too much of a mess. All right, the next thing I need to do here is compress that brake piston. So, got this little brake compressor here. It's not the greatest tool, but it does work. And I got my little makeshift one-man brake bleeder here. So, what I'm do is I'm going to break open this bleeder nipple. Tie it pretty tight. So just get that cracked open. Because as you compress the piston, brake fluid is going to flow through. Probably some better tools out there, but this one I'm gonna try. I'm having a little problem here. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm compressing the brake piston in with this little tool, and I also got the bleeder nipple open with my makeshift one-man brake bleeder. So it's gonna take a while to get it primed, to get it going at first, but once you get it going, it's fairly easy as long as it doesn't constantly slip off. It's exactly not an easy tool to work with. I'm sure there's better tools out there, but I didn't feel like spending like $40 for it. Okay, So I got that compressed in. Not an easy task. But while you do it, be careful that that cube doesn't slide around inside, because if you rip that boot, then you're going to have fluid just leaking out, and it's going to cause pressure to back up into the system. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting some anti-seize on the spindle and the studs themselves. So that way the rust won't adhere itself to the new brake rotor over time. So just get a light glaze on that. Alright, before installing the new rotor, spray it down with brake cleaner, get some paper towels, wipe it down. Be sure to do both sides because it has a rust protectant on there, and you don't want that getting on the brake pads because then you're going to have brake failure. So I got that new rotor on there. Take an old lug nut, place it on there so it holds it in place. And then I'm going to put these screws back in. Just to make sure it gets all lined up properly with those holes. So you can put the retaining screws. And I'm going to do that with both of those. And so I'm going to put on the brake caliper bracket. So I'm going to use a little bit of red Loctite. Put around the bolts. And reinstall this. So you're going to be using those 17mm bolts to put this back into place. And do your best not to touch the brake caliper. You don't want, or the rotor rather. You don't want to get that dirty. So one thing I'm going to do here, the sliding pins for the brake caliper, I'm going to spray these off with some brake parts cleaner. Wipe them down with a paper towel, get that old grease off. And then I'm just going to re-grease these with some brake lubricant. A little brush here. So I'm going to wipe that all over. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. And then I'm going to put those back into that brake caliper bracket. Right, so they're going to go right in here. Top and bottom. Make sure you put it on there so it retracts. Make sure those rubber boots go around these little edges here. So just give them a tug. As long as they come back, good to go. Alright, one thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to put some of that lubricant on these clips. So that way the brakes will slide in and out. And it will cause, well, minimal squeaks to no squeaks. And be sure, just keep in mind, if you use like a pressure washer on your rims, you could possibly end up taking this grease out of these clips. And also I'm going to be spreading it on the back of the pads to help with noise suppression as well. So if you use a pressure washer, you could potentially just wash all this right off. So just keep that in mind. Alright, after you get the brake caliper put back on, just put a little bit of Loctite on those 13mm bolts. That's going to hold the caliper to the bracket. And remember, these are 13mm, and the spindle that's here, that's a 17mm. So hold that down with a 17mm wrench, and then you can spin this one on with a 13mm wrench or socket. Alright, tip that I've given before. I'm just going to put some anti-seize on the outside of the rotor. I already did it on the spindle, and I don't have to reapply to the studs because it's already been done. So just get a light glaze on that as well, because over time these will rust, and it'll help you take the wheels off next time that you actually have to, so the rust won't bind onto the aluminum wheel itself. Alright, so what's being done here is we're going to bleed the brakes. So she's working on my friend's car, so I got her stepping on the brake. You can see that the fluid is running through. So I got this makeshift brake bleeder here. So I'm just going to get her to step on that 5 times, get some of that dirty fluid out, run some new fluid through it, and get the air out as well. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to torque down the lug nut, so I got it at 95 foot-pounds. And do the star pattern. Wait for that audible click, do it twice. just go around till you're finished. Alright, I'm just going to give a little rundown of some of the tools that I used for that brake job. So for the rear, I was more focused on the rear. I really didn't see the need to video the front end due to the fact that it is your basic front-of-the-mill brake job. Nothing really too special to be used out of the norm. But the rear, I was more focused on it due to the fact that it had a rotating piston that you had to rotate back into the caliper itself as opposed to just regularly compressing it, which would not work. So I'm using this here, and I use a 3/8 socket extension on the end of a socket wrench or a ratchet, and it worked okay, not too bad. When you're first priming it back into the caliper, that was like the big issue, just getting it started. But the more you worked on it, the easier it got. But you do have to be careful. You don't want any of those edges to rip the boot around that piston. Otherwise, you're going to have fluid leaking out and air couldn't back up into the system, causing a mushy brake pedal and possible brake failure. For the front, this is a different tool. Does the same thing, just different concept, because you're not rotating the caliper in. So I would just slide this into the brake caliper itself, and I would use this end here to push in an old brake pad into the piston, and that's how I compress it. And it's best to crack open that bleeder nipple so that way the pressure will come out with that fluid. And I bought this at Walmart. This was $8. And all that time, I just using this today. Today was the first time I ever used one of these. And I just questioned why I never bought one of these before. Always using C-clamps. This is so much easier than a C-clamp. So this is that hyper tough Walmart stuff. And use the torque wrench. This is a 1/2-inch torque wrench, which I picked up at Sears for $60. And it works really well. So I use that to torque down the lug nuts, get that to proper specifications, not to have any issues. And that's pretty much it. That's just the way it goes. It was took a couple hours to do, nothing too bad. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments what you think. If you have any tips on how you do brakes, I'd love to read about it. Thank you, and this is Chemical Spore, out.